Hi there Waltoneers, I'm Jack and this is DSNY Newscast, and today I want to focus in and talk about the Piston Peak National Park that's going to be coming to the Magic Kingdom. And to act as a quick refresher here, this is the expansion to Frontierland that will be inspired by the world of Cars, which will be located in the front half of the former Rivers of America within Magic Kingdom. So it's quite a sizable location there. It's roughly around 4.5 acres of space for this Piston Peak National Park environment. And recently there's been quite a lot of construction activity on this area, which I want to discuss, but I also want to do a deep dive into this project. It's been a while since the last time I spoke about it, and I've managed to uncover some new details which I want to discuss with all of you. So with that being said, let's begin with the construction update. As previously we've spoken about how they've put the wooden forms in place ready for the concrete pour, and then the concrete foundations going down. But now the project has indeed gone vertical on Piston Peak National Park, as we can see here, thanks to these aerial images from BioReconstruct over on Twitter and also Instagram, that was spotted on March 19th that vertical construction had taken place on this project. But it's not just visible from the air, as a few days later on March 21st I went to Magic Kingdom and it's actually visible from within the park itself, from the guest view areas. If you stand over by the bridge for Tiana's Bayou Adventure and look into the construction site, you can quite easily see the construction peeking out above the top of the construction walls for the Piston Peak National Park area. Now, if you're wondering what this vertical construction's for, it's likely to be for the retention walls, for the water system that's going to separate Frontierland from Piston Peak as a natural divider between the two within the area. So, as you can see within the artwork, there's quite a lot of water that flows around the perimeter of Piston Peak and will act as that natural divider between the two areas there. And looking at the aerial construction images here, there's quite a lot of progress that's been made on this retention wall, but I would still say it's probably under a quarter of the way done in terms of the entire perimeter of this retention wall, as it's not just one side that needs to be done. They'll probably need to have a retention wall on the other side to truly retain that water system in place securely around that area. And if you're wondering why they're beginning with something like the water system instead of something more fun like the theming of the mountainside for Piston Peak, it's because the water system requires a more extensive timeline for preparation and planning for the plumbing and pipe work that will go into the area, and also managing the stormwater overflows, for water treatment, all that sort of stuff. It's just very critical infrastructure that needs to be done right to begin with, because if you start working on all the theming and doing the buildings and then need to make changes to something like the water system later, it becomes quite expensive and very difficult to do, as you're then having to work under structures and all that sort of stuff. And so that's the construction update portion of this video, but now we're starting to see it take shape within the park itself. We can couple that with what we can see from the permits that have been filed for the area, and I've also taken a look back at the notes from the Imagineering meeting that they had with news outlets last June on this Piston Peak, and decided to cross-reference us all together to try and discover some new details about this. As now it's taking shape, you can start to see certain elements and you start to work things out. So with that being said, what we've had so far released in terms of the layout has been this highly stylized, fun map for the area, which gives a good understanding of the area, but it's, harder to decipher exactly where everything will be. And so instead, I've done a lot of work on my own top-down satellite view map of the area for Piston Peak that you can now see on the screen here. And should be said that this is an approximation of everything. Obviously it's not exactly where everything will be down to the meter or foot within the area, and more importantly you can see an approximation of the ride path for this off-road rally race for Piston Peak. And there are going to be 4 distinct areas of this attraction, this off-road rally race. The first one will be the Piston Peak mountainside, which is where you'll first enter. That's the direction of travel for this attraction. So you'll come straight out of the loading area and head down a couple of turns and around some corners and then up into the mountainous landscape here of Piston Peak. And then coming out of the mountains, you'll head down into the mud flats. And then the next area is the caves over in the top right hand corner of this map here. And then coming out of the caves, you'll enter into some geysers and rainbow pools around Big Thunder, and then back towards the finish line for the unload for the attraction. And all of this is being inspired by real-world national park environments. And the first one is the Piston Peak Mountains themselves, as this is actually inspired by the Rocky Mountains of Colorado and Wyoming, and the snow-capped ridges that you can see of Piston Peak. And then the next one is mudflats, and the best inspiration that I can possibly find for this mudflat area is probably the San Luis Valley within Colorado, where the sand dunes turn into kind of a mudflat landscape when there's enough of a rainfall on the area there. So that's what I reckon is inspiring the mudflat portion of this ride. Then you've got the cave system, and I reckon this is drawing inspiration from Bryce Canyon and Goblin Valley, actually in Utah, with the hoodoos and the buttes on top of the caves there that you can see within the highly stylized artwork. I think that's what's being used as inspiration for the geological landscape of the area. Then naturally with the geysers and the grand prismatic springs and the rainbow pools that you can see within the artwork, this is very much likely to be inspired by Wyoming's Yellowstone National Park, obviously, with Old Faithful and stuff like that. And that massive geyser that you can see within the artwork is actually going to be known as Old Tankful. I went over my notes from last year, and that's what the Imagineering teams used as a name for it, so most likely it will be known as Old Tankful within this area. And so all of this theming that you can see that makes up Piston Peak National Park is very much grounded in reality, but it's got this kind of whimsical, cartoony, Cars-inspired twist to it. So for instance, I remember they said last year in the meeting that the geysers within that area, they will be functioning geysers, but also they will have slight tyre marks around the outside of them. So they'll look like formations of like tractor tyres that have just been put on the ground around the area, but obviously they are rockwork instead. So it's kind of drawing inspiration from that automotive design there within the actual real world theming of this area. But also they're drawing upon the national park architecture itself, which is known as parkitecture for Piston Peak. And the best way I can describe this is, from what we saw last year, is it looked very similar in a way to Wilderness Lodge. So if you love that resort at Walt Disney World, you're going to love Piston Peak. And I very much love the Wilderness Lodge design aesthetic and the architecture there. So I've gone from not being a big fan of seeing cars within Magic Kingdom to actually very much looking forward to seeing Piston Peak come to life within Magic Kingdom. I think it's truly going to add a lot to the park itself, and having that kind of environment within Frontierland and adding that whole American wilderness aspect to the Frontierland that we know within Magic Kingdom there. Now the Piston Peak mountain itself is going to be the main icon of this whole area, and it's going to be extremely impressive. And I remember they showed us some artwork last year, and I made a note of it at the time, that it's approximately double the height of the riverboat dock, at least from the image that they showed us in the meeting. And it's really going to have a natural landscape look to it as it's sat there behind the back of the riverboat dock, which obviously the riverboat dock isn't going to be for the riverboat anymore. I suspect it's probably going to be converted into some sort of national park outpost or something like that, maybe a meet and greet space for different characters within Liberty Square. But it's going to change what they're going to use that whole building for, but it's going to remain in place. And the mountain aspect to Piston Peak will also have a cascading waterfall that is going to be very reminiscent to Grizzly Peak's waterfall over in Disney California Adventure. So how that water feature kind of trickles down the rockwork there, I think it's going to be very similar in a way to that. I think there'll be more water because it's got more water to flow into around the bottom and the base of the mountain. Now with Piston Peak, a lot of the focus is being put onto the Piston Peak icon itself, but I don't see a lot of attention being given to the cave system that's also within this highly stylized artwork. And I think this is very important because it seems as if there's going to be a tunnel that goes into this cave system. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the construction has begun over near Tiana's Bayou Adventure for this retention wall. Just looking at the artwork, it seems as if the water does flow over the top of the ride path, over the top of that tunnel. Then that's going to become a much more complicated part of this whole retention wall and water system for the area of Piston Peak. So that's most likely the reason why they've begun in that quadrant of the area there for this expansion, in terms of getting that construction done first, because they'll need to do some sort of tunnel through that area and build that into the whole system for the water. And then other natural elements here are the geysers and the springs and the rainbow pools within the final section of this rally race attraction. And I remember last year they made a note of saying how the geysers will have a natural transition from being more inspired by the world of Cars with the tyre marks around the geysers and stuff like that, to then naturally kind of transitioning over to the more natural look of geysers that can be found over near Big Thunder. So it's going to be this one geyser field that will kind of merge and expand the Big Thunder footprint right up against Piston Peak and kind of add this whole kind of transition to the area, which is very cleverly done. Then, characters that we can expect within this attraction. Last year it was announced that there'll be a new character called Ranger J. Autobahn Woodlaw. And this character is based on a similar character from the Donald Duck cartoons from the 1950s that was a national park ranger. And this character will be found within the pre-show for the attraction, and they showed us in the meeting last year previs animation of what this could look like within the attraction, and it's the character giving a talk about what the rally race will be for the attraction. I think they should call him a parked ranger. I said this last year in the video. It's a free idea. Maybe they've already decided to call him a parked ranger, but they just didn't tell us at the time. But I think that'd be very funny if they called him a parked ranger as a pun there on park ranger. And then two other AAs that we know that will be within the attraction as well. Certainly Lightning McQueen and Mater will be in animatronic form at the end of the race. So we can see within this artwork here they're kind of doing commentary for RSN, and it'll probably be very similar to Radiator Springs races where they're congratulating you at the end of the rally race. And I suspect that they might be using the same animatronic from Lightning McQueen's Racing Academy. I think it'd be silly not to take that same animatronic, that it's already been constructed and is in place, and it's already been constructed and hopefully sitting in storage somewhere, and they'll just use that within the attraction. But who knows, they might make a whole new animatronic with new technology for Lightning McQueen within this attraction. And another thing that we can do here, just for the fun of it, is if we overlay my map that I created on top of Google Earth, it will then give a very rough approximation of what the length of the track could realistically be. And I measured it out to be roughly around 2,000 feet. So to put that into perspective for you, when you measure out the outdoor portion of Radiator Springs races over in California Adventure, just the outdoor portion this is, because we can't see inside the building obviously from Google Earth, that is roughly 2,100 feet long. So it's pretty similar to the outdoor portion of Radiator Springs races. But what the big difference here is, in Radiator Springs races, you're traveling at, higher speeds up to 40 miles an hour within certain stretches of that track, and it only lasts for roughly a minute of outdoor time there within Radiator Springs races. Whereas this attraction, the vehicles themselves will be moving at a much slower pace because it's a different style of attraction. It's not trying to be a speed race, it's aiming for an off-road rally race where the vehicles are moving slower, but they're offering different dynamics in terms of terrain and bouncing around and banked curves and stuff like that. All of that is going to be adding to the thrill level for this attraction instead. So I reckon to justify the 2,000 feet long track for this area, if it's roughly around that, I reckon it'll be around 3.5 minutes to maybe 4, including the load and unload. I think that's what they would need it to be to justify the size of a footprint of this attraction within the landscape. And then speaking of this ride system, it was previously described at South by Southwest last year in March that they're building an all-new custom ride vehicle and ride system for this attraction. So I don't think they're going to be using the slot car system that can be found over in Test Track and Radiator Springs races that has issues when there's, weather in the area, whether it be thunderstorms or heavy rain, anything like that, they have to shut down the attraction. Instead, I think this is going to be a very specialised ride system for this attraction. And they mentioned on stage that it was a specialised suspension system that they're going to be building to deliver that unique ATV, all-terrain vehicle, bouncy kind of feeling to the vehicle itself. So a bit like when they went back and they designed the EMV, the Enhanced Motion Vehicle, to mimic the Jeep within Indiana Jones Adventure, and then they used it for Dinosaur as well. They're designing something completely new for this attraction with this off-road rally race. So just from a sheer experience standpoint, it's going to be something we've never experienced before, which I'm very much looking forward to. And then we've got the whole debate between track-based system versus trackless system. And certainly later on this year at D23, we'll find out more details about this attraction, and hopefully we'll have that cleared up and we'll know exactly what we can expect from it. But where I stand on this whole thing is I'm hoping it's going to be trackless, because a track-based system, I feel, would remove a lot of the spontaneity of this off-road rally race within the natural environments of going up the mountainside and down the mud flats and into the caves and all that sort of stuff. And if you can see the track ahead of you, it kind of removes some of that spontaneity, and you're not really going for speed here, you're going for overtaking and weaving in and out and all that sort of stuff for these vehicles, which will add to that race aspect to this whole idea. So I'm hoping it's going to be trackless. But in a video that they showed at South by Southwest last year, they showed a vehicle going along a track, and I think that that model is just using a track, because when they do models like this, they need to have repeatability to kind of really assess it and make changes. And the easiest way to do that would be to have it on a tracked system just for the model itself, for the testing and looking at it, making changes to the ride system itself. So for repeated demonstration purposes, I think that's the reason why they were using a track there. And I'm not going to read too much into that being within the model. But maybe it will have a track, and maybe the track will be hidden view and they'll work some magic on it and hide it out of guest view. That would be great as well, but I'm hoping it's going to be trackless. I think that'd be fantastic within the area here. And then that brings us to some recent patents that have been filed by Disney, and one of them certainly sounds like the off-road rally race. Now, it's been titled as a ride system featuring a free-range vehicle platform, and it was filed on September 11th, 2024, roughly a month after D23, and it was published on March 12th, 2026. Within the description for this patent, it's described that a ride system may include a track including uneven terrain, which does certainly sound very similar to the off-road rally race here. And further on, it says that the user control may be configured to select chosen paths and adjust the speed and direction of the ride vehicle along that chosen path, with a fleet controller used to control the spacing between the vehicles and override it, so therefore there's a consistent experience as well. So that certainly sounds like this attraction. And then further on in this patent, it also says that this free roaming vehicle platform is capable of traversing uneven terrain, in parentheses off-road there, and grade changes, and the capabilities described allow for unique off-road type experiences and the ability to traverse up and down hills and orchestrate track paths across multiple vertical levels without using elevators. So this, to me at least, sounds very, very similar to the off-road rally race. And a lot of different news outlets have also reported on this, saying that this could very well be what we're going to get with the off-road rally race. And if it's true, then that's going to be fantastic in terms of the ride experience here. Then there's another patent that was filed on July 24th, 2024, obviously before D23 2024, and it was published on January 29th, 2026. And this is for what's titled as a ride system having an articulating arm. Now, within the description here, it says that it's a ride system that may include a ride vehicle configured to move along a ride path adjacent to a track and an arm coupled with the ride vehicle. And it seems like this might be used for maybe a family-friendly flat ride like we can see within the area there. Now, we haven't got any artwork for the flat ride yet in terms of seeing the actual vehicles themselves, so it's a lot harder to judge what they're going for. But this would be a more controlled system and be kind of a new take on maybe a spinner ride. So instead of having the spinner be in the middle, like with Flying Carpets or Dumbo, and then having the arms coming out and spinning around the outside of it, it could be that you are kind of controlling the inside part of it and the tracks running around the outside, so it kind of inverts the idea of a spinner ride. And then it would be a flat ride that would have uneven terrain where you'd be bouncing along like the main attraction with the off-road rally race, but it'd be a much smaller area and suitable for younger ages as well. But there are two things that have me more skeptical about talking about these patents, certainly saying these are for the attractions, and I just want to mention them. And the first one is that oftentimes there's a delayed publication on certain patents if they're to do with an actual attraction project. An example of this is Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run and that specialised turntable for the cockpits within that attraction. and that opened in May of 2019, and the patent was then published on October 1st, 2019. So it was a good bit of time after that ride had opened that they decided to release and make public the patent for the attraction there. So it could be that they've reversed course on that and they've decided to not delay publication and this is what we're going to get. Or it could just be that this sounds very similar to the attraction. And then the other thing is, don't read too much into the diagrams. That's what I learned from last year of the Imagineering tour. Had an interview with Imagineer Dave Crawford, who actually worked on a lot of these Disney patents. And I asked him at the time, the diagrams that they use for these patents, are they little Easter eggs to certain attractions or certain projects that they're working on? And he said, no, they're just what they use for the patents themselves, because to try and start using certain IP within the patents would create all sorts of difficulties in terms of legal. So I would say don't read too much into the diagrams here, but it's very hard to do so when you can see in that first patent, it certainly looks like an off-road rally race car within the patent itself. And so it's interesting, but I would say take it with a pinch of salt, some of this stuff, until we get more details or see a finalised model, which, speaking of which, D23 is around the corner in August, and I do expect that we'll probably see a finalised model like we've seen for Tropical Americas and stuff like that for Piston Peak National Park, and hopefully more artwork and more details for these attractions within the land, because I reckon that this is going to be targeting roughly 2029, maybe late 2028, but most likely 2029 for this project open. And the reason for that is because I think Disney wants a staggered phased opening of having one new thing every year over the next 5 years. And if you think about it, Tropical Americas next year in 2027, I think Monsters Inc. could very easily open for 2028. Piston Peak National Park, maybe 2029, and then 2030 could be Villains Land, or end of 2029 could be Villains Land. So therefore that would stretch it out and make it so therefore Disney has something completely new to market their entire year around at Walt Disney World every single year for the next 5 years. And I'm just very much looking forward to D23 this year in August and finding out a lot more details about these projects. And so with all of that being said for today, hopefully you've enjoyed this video, but now it's over to you, the Waltoneers, as I would like to know what are your thoughts and opinions on the Piston Peak National Park project, this off-road rally race. What would you like to see in terms of the attraction itself, ride elements, any sort of interior show scenes, anything else within the attraction itself there? And also be sure to subscribe down below, check out the rest of the videos on this channel, and also give this video a massive thumbs up if you enjoyed this video for today. And I'd also like to say a massive thank you to the official Waltoneer Club over on Patreon for always supporting this channel. It's very much appreciated. And I'd also like to give a shout out to the Waltoneer Gold members that you can see here on the screen right now, and also official Waltoneer Diamond members JC Russell, Justin Tupper, and Tim and Stephen Parsons. And with that being said for today, I've been Jack, you've been you, and I'll see you real soon.